And just like that, July is suddenly in play. I can't believe it! We'll see how the Jurassic World Rebirth trailer looks tomorrow, but I gotta say, and I didn't love the Superman trailer either, but I like it more than this, and they have a similar vibe a little bit. They both have Superman I think has kind of a retro feel, but, I don't think that James Gunn has gotten lost in this branding idea, this theming idea like Marvel has. I think Marvel's over theming. We're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss it. But yeah, which trailer do you prefer between the Superman trailer and the Fantastic Four trailer? Both first looks. And I got to say, I think Superman is the better trailer of the two. And it has a 2-week lead on this movie. The internet pretty much overall is like, I think everybody's a little miffed that Marvel made us wake up ridiculously early, then wait an hour for the broadcast. A 15-minute themed pre-roll would have been fine. Or if the pre-roll had more to it. But it was just kind of like on repeat. And then, even when it was an hour, they were like, let's talk to the cast. And in the comments, I saw everybody who was watching live was like, why don't you do this after you drop the trailer? And also, this was the most interesting thing to me. Everybody wanted to know where Robert Downey Jr. was. And I was like, uh-oh, he's not a star in this movie. But Robert Downey Jr. is like, yes, he's back. Robert Downey Jr. loves to be the star. And that's who everybody wanted to see. They had a hard time casting this movie. A lot of their first choices said, maybe, and then ultimately, no, thank you. And I think that we were getting, we made ourselves excited about the cast that they went with. We had some reservations, but I think now that we've seen them in this teaser trailer, we're back to being a little bit, I don't know how good the casting turned out. I think that might end up being a real problem for this movie. I think obviously they're going for The Incredibles, but it doesn't feel, The Incredibles, WandaVision, although one of you have made a very interesting point in my trailer reaction, and that's that Fallout has a similar vibe, even down to the blue suits, but yet is more vibrant. And that's a streaming show, and this is a movie. It reminds me actually of two films, which both went with not only a 1960s time period, but also a cold aesthetic. I don't know, I guess because science, right? That's why why they chose it here. I think it's making it look a little austere, a little bit hard to connect with, and a little streaming-y. But it reminded me of the recent Indiana Jones film from James Mangold, even down to these posters. My Kingdom for a Character poster, man. I like the main poster they released yesterday. But these posters, again, they're so like, look at the theming. And I'm like, man, but I'm not as excited as the crowd in that poster. You haven't sold me. I'm like, what's that crowd looking at? It must be amazing. I wish you'd turn the picture over there so I could see what they were looking at. And then also, some of you said X-Men First Class, which I found very interesting. Because a lot of like, comic book super hardcore. I don't like X-Men First Class, and I'm an X-Men fan. But some people really liked it, but not a lot. It's one of the lowest grossing X-Men movies. And that group of X-Men only did well when they paired them with the originals for X-Men Days of Future Past, which was a more vibrant, energetic film. But yeah, this reminds me of X-Men First Class meets the recent Indiana Jones film. And that's a horrible pitch. So we're going to go through this. But I am very, I said in my trailer reaction that while intellectually I recognize that it's very comics accurate, it's just not hitting me in the feels, at least not yet. And again, I do think they got maybe lost in this idea of it's the 60s. And I'm like, all right, so let's go through it, all right? Okay, here we go. So yes, we start in the Baxter Building. And yep, that is very Incredibles, very much so. Although oddly on a smaller scale. I'm like, the Incredibles living room looked a little bit better. But yeah, that's definitely the Incredibles. And I think for Disney to some degree, this would be nice for theming, for theme parks. The Contemporary Hotel was recently redone for the Incredibles. I guess they could make it the Future Family Hotel and also put the Fantastic Four in there if the film is successful. So I can, and I think it lends itself to merch, like people like the Pan Am stuff that's been popular. Some of you mentioned it looks like the TWA hotel at, where was that, JFK or whatever, but I think that, again, Mad Men got a lot of awards. People like to talk about Mad Men, but not a lot of people watched Mad Men. That's not something that's discussed very often because it makes the show look bad, but Mad Men actually didn't have a very big audience. All right, so there we are in the Baxter Building, and you'll notice that Vanessa Kirby, just like Jack Kirby, no relation, I'm sure, but this actress's name is Vanessa Kirby, and Jack Kirby was the artist and co-plotter, because of the way Stan Lee wrote comics, of the original Fantastic Four. So here we are in the Baxter Building, getting a tour. And, it's very stilted. Some of you aren't sold on Pedro Pascal as Reed. We'll talk about him in a later shot. I think he's okay. He's definitely doing a character. Yeah, I think maybe that's another element that seems weird. They're not just playing these characters. It feels very much like they've gotten the direction that they're doing a wink, wink Saturday Night Live sketch, 1960s parody, instead of just they're genuinely these characters. So I'll be curious to see how they mix in with the rest of the MCU eventually, because they're not just in a different time period. I wish it played like Mad Men. They act like, oh, what do you think, Jim? It's interesting. It's an interesting choice. So they're like family dinner nights. It is a little Jetsons-y too. Marvel Studios, look at the screen widen. So there's the Baxter Building. A lot of buildings. We're getting our little MCU map here. And I like the way it has a little bit of a World's Fair feel to it as well. The World's Fair, of course, is synonymous, not just with Walt Disney, but they did a play on that with Iron Man 2 and Howard Stark being a part of the Stark Expo, which also was modeled after the World's Fair. But there's the Baxter Building, I guess the Avengers Tower of this universe in the multiverse. They got a little landing pad up there. All right. There's Herbie. We'll see who voices Herbie. Will Herbie, be like the comics, or I suspect they maybe might do a little Rosie from the Jetsons as well here. So Rosie's cooking up dinner, but Ben's got notes. So what do you think? Now, when I first saw him in the reaction, I was like, oh my God, he's so comics accurate. But then he spoke, and it didn't sound like the voice was coming out of his body. It does, and I know, he might as well be practical, because it looks kind of practical. Something about it just doesn't work. And still, they put a happy face on that. Well, not a totally happy face. He's depressed, as you see later in this very teaser trailer. But I think it's quite horrific that this is what he would become and what he would have to live inside all the time. That's one of the things I liked about the last Fantastic Four film. The body horror of it. I know. I mean, look, the third act of that movie was awful, for sure. But I think through the Doom entrance was incredible. Parts of that movie I thought were very good. And I mean, it's hard to sell that this guy is not just screaming inside all the time. When he kind of is, I guess, but it just doesn't feel like, Ebon's voice is coming out of here. So he's got cooking notes. They're playing into the bear, right? And also Wanda and Vision had their own little kitchen discussion. They're like, you rascals. You'll notice, of course, the hair is very different here. There are slight differences. Vanessa Kirby in particular gives it away. The movie, clearly, you can now see, will have different, it's going to jump back and forth in time. So they're all just sitting there. Herbie's like, why don't you all get off your butts and help me cook this dinner? You think they'd at least go and do something else until dinner was ready. I wonder what Herbie's thinking. Herbie didn't say anything, but I'd be like, I love this. So this is clearly Reed's lab, and he's got a super blackboard. And you know what? It reminds me a little bit of Oppenheimer. And that was perfect, because I was like, oh my God, Oppenheimer was so Reed Richards. Even down to being a bit of a jerk, and more, so captivated by whether or not he can, he doesn't think about whether or not he should. Of course, speaking of Jurassic movies, that's a nice little crossover right there. But yeah, Oppenheimer is a perfect Reed Richards. And again, I almost wish they were doing a more realistic version of the character than this caricature that they seem to have decided to go with instead. But in this more serious, quiet moment, I think he feels the most like the character. So he's doing his equations. And there's a flashback to going into space back when everything was hunky-dory. Maybe those suits look kind of flimsy. I think I might have figured out the problem, how they got bombarded with all those cosmic rays. Cosmic Rays. That's a great restaurant to eat at Tomorrowland at Disney World. Okay. So there they are in their fancy spaceship. Ooh, maybe we should have spent less time on the aesthetics and more on, again, protecting me from cosmic rays. So this is interesting. First of all, they seem more like friends than I don't feel a lot of heat between these two characters. So, hey, Namor, come on in here, baby. I think there's an opening for you as well. But this also reminds me very much of a number of scenes in The Incredibles between, Bob and Helen talking about, the dynamic and what they're dealing with. So he's like, it's different this time. You weren't invisible. She doesn't seem to even be, she doesn't seem to be wearing her suit at all. I wonder what's going on here. I think she's instinctively turning invisible for the sparks. But does that mean, so there's an interesting question here, especially when how they're portraying how her powers work. So she's not Kitty Pryde, right? Let's get our nerd on. She's not Kitty Pryde. She can't turn intangible. She can only turn invisible. And so is she therefore bending light? But if she's only bending light, then does she also, remember, can create invisible force fields? So are those constructs out of light? And then she just becomes kind of a mix of Wanda and Spectrum from WandaVision. So I'm curious over the years, she just started out turning invisible. And you were like, what's with this 1960s power for a woman? But over the years, they've done a great job of showing how powerful she is because she's really a force field generator. And she can create, not only discs to fly on or slide on, but she can force fields. She can stop your heart by blocking your arteries with a little mini force field. Her power is really invisible force fields, and one that she can obviously deploy around her own body to make herself invisible. But I'm not quite getting what the power set is here. It's a little, The Incredibles, speaking of The Incredibles, that's obviously based on the Fantastic Four, even down to the power sets. And Violet is a take on the Invisible Woman, even down to Violet's ability to turn invisible. All right. So this, to me, I'm like, I don't know. This, I think they should have redone because I can tell they added her later because you can see that he doesn't even know what his hand's resting. They're like, put your hand there. We're going to add her in post. All right, so Ben Grimm, he's in an alleyway. Oh, also, what reminds me also a little bit of Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, which also had a very cold feel to it as well, which I think might have hurt it with general audiences. So there he is. I love this. It reminded me that back in the day, before we all carried a little TV in our pockets, if you wanted to see what was going on with breaking news, you had to find a local electronics store and look in the window. So they're showing some old footage. And he's like, he's the best pilot in the world. And he says, the handsomest. And then he's like, not anymore. That's sad. I really felt that. But still well dressed. Who's making these clothes? Okay. So I got to tell you, I love Joseph Quinn. I think he's a wonderful actor, but he's horribly miscast as Johnny Storm. We all agree that it should have been Austin Butler or anybody else. Johnny Storm is supposed to be a rock star. He's supposed to be a heartthrob. And I don't think that's at all it's just the wrong casting. So, but I have to say, well, he's poorly cast. By the way, everybody's coming back inside. They're like, oh no, they're rushing back in off the veranda. But I gotta say, the visual effects on him flying look pretty darn good. Those look excellent. Right out of the comics. Flame on, for sure, my friend. I love that. So he looks good. He looks very good in that regard. So I like the ponytail on Vanessa Kirby. I gotta say, I don't think her hair looks great in this trailer. I'm surprised. I'm like, how did you get that wrong? Some of you pointed out, particularly in the 1960s, when hair was a religion. But she looks good in a ponytail, and I think I would have advised them just to have her in a ponytail all the time. So she's getting along with Ben. She's clearly, going to be a focal point in the film. And we'll see how that goes over with, will women want to see this movie and how will men feel about it? Especially because, once again, they didn't go the cheesecake route. Margot Robbie had been rumored to be in talks. I think they ultimately ended up, although a lot of people in the chat were very impressed with her outfit for the interview this morning. I think she styled herself in a more cheesecake way, and maybe I don't know. I think maybe that would have benefited the character that she's playing. So she's like, she looks pretty good there. She's like, our powers mimic who we are. Although I wish she just said Johnny was a hothead. I know it's on the nose, but come on, there he is. Woohoo! Woo! He's so here. This is pretty great. Again, though, I'm like, man, my God, who approved this look? Okay, and also that belt. There's no way that actually does anything. This Halloween versions of this costume are going to be super easy. So you can see the Fantastic Car there in the background. This is so Incredibles. It's so The Incredibles. So she's going to throw up a force field. Here it comes. Whee! All right. So I'm sure Vanessa Kirby doesn't want to totally never be on screen. It's a little bit like the Cyclops problem. They're like, but your power covers your eyes. And he's like, but yet my power covers my eyes, and therefore you can't connect to my character. And so she's like, am I going to be off screen every time I use my powers? And they're like, no, we'll put a prism rainbow effect around you. Pollyanna fans unite. But I got to tell you, I don't really think it feels like the power set to me. The comics had gone with like a blue glow to show the invisible stuff, the invisible force fields. And I think we've all kind of just gotten used to that. So this, I guess, maybe we'll get used to this as well. But she's not, is she bending light? But if she's just bending light, then she's not creating force fields. So that would significantly depower her if she just bends light and makes things invisible. I guess, again, think Violet from The Incredibles. So let's see. They got to really sell us on these power sets. As everyone pointed out, the only one they didn't show us was Reed Richards. So are they saving that, or are they still working on making it look good? This is not a great shot. Again, I'm a little frustrated because I watched The Crown. Vanessa Kirby can look incredible, but unfortunately she seems to have the styling that she had from the Mission Impossible movies, where she does not look as good. It's like, it's your only female character. It's the 1960s. She's got to give mother. You got to get it right. So there's Johnny Storm. He's just misdressed. He's just not, I'm sorry. He doesn't even dress like a heartthrob. He dresses like a country club guy. But that's not Johnny Storm. I guess it is now. All right, so... Ooh, Galactus. Did he just burp? All right, so those of you who don't know, Galactus eats planets. So that's where that joke comes from. But I've always thought Galactus was a ridiculous character, even as a comic book fan. And so I think Galactus is going to be an incredibly hard sell to general audiences. Comic book fans will be like, yes, that's exactly what Galactus looks like. Thank you very much. But I think general audiences are going to be like, what does he do? What's he wearing on his head? That's ridiculous. Let's go see Superman again. All right. So, hey, the Thing seems to be pretty popular. He's selling a lot of merch, at least. So there's the Fantastic Car, and they're like, we don't pay for extras. Maybe it's very early in the morning. They're like, there's nobody on the street. Shut up. I don't want to hear it. This movie was expensive enough as it was. All right, so again, the flying looks fantastic. The fire effect looks amazing. Woo, here we go. So there's Ben Grimm. I gotta tell you, I'm just seeing a Rocky the Hulk. But I tell you, I've never been a big The Thing fan. Some of you are like, oh, what did you just say, Grace? I'm sorry, I'm not a big Thing fan. All right, so there he goes. And we'll see who John Malkovich is playing. They have a very big all-star cast, but he's the only one who rated the teaser. That's a nice shot. Earlier, simpler, more innocent days. And there's New York, looking pretty much like the way it looks. I see a couple of futuristic buildings photoshopped in there. They need more. It should definitely, as soon as I see it, I should be like, what New York is this? Like, where is the Baxter Building? Isn't it supposed to be where the United Nations is? Is it all the way on the side there? Is it that tiny little building? It looks so much bigger in the trailer. Okay, that is where the United Nations is. Okay, so they haven't stuck Cap's shield on their Statue of Liberty, and there's Galactus, looking actually somewhat tiny. How's he going to eat this planet if he's so tiny? And that's his dumb hat. And I would have nixed this shot. I'd be like, oh God, no. All right, that's as bad as Superman having the weird eyes. That's how bad that shot looks. All right, and so there they are. I don't know why these arrows are all pointing at them. I'd be like, rip these arrows out if I was doing this presentation. And there they are. They look, I mean, it's a nice shot. They look very comics accurate. But I'm not like, I don't look at them and go, I want to be a fantastic, they just don't look that cool. They look fine. I mean, that's the Fantastic Four, all right. And there's the logo. They're like, woo, 1960s. And I think everyone's like, presented in Fantastivision. And as some of you pointed out, they still have that 20th Century Studios thing on there, which I think is interesting. Welcome to the family. Vin Diesel's like, come on, but yes, welcome to the family, July 25th. So, that's, let me get back to the shot here. I guess we'll go with this one. So that's my thoughts on the trailer. I think, again, I thought it was surprisingly just medium, and I think that Superman has a real shot at, I think, and again, we'll see how Jurassic World Rebirth shakes out tomorrow, but I think that July just got a lot more competitive instead of the wipeout that we thought that was going to happen. What do you think? Share your thoughts down below. What do you think of the casting? What do you think of the choice to stylize it so heavily? What movies does it remind you of? And if it doesn't totally work for you, why not? And if you're all crazy, you guys are all so nitpicky, which is funny because that's usually the conversation around DC. What do you love about it? What do you think we're missing? Share those thoughts down below. Oh, and I have one last question for you. Do you actually read Fantastic Four comics? I don't think a lot of people do. I mean, I pick them up occasionally. I picked them up when they were the Future Foundation, when they were really leaning into that. I read them for a little while at that point, but I have never been, nobody really reads. I mean, somebody obviously reads them, but, they keep rebooting the comic for a reason. They're like, do you like it now? Are you interested in it now? How about now? All right, how about now? Kind of like what's been happening with the movies. All right, share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.